Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We are back.
Good afternoon, everyone. So just Joel under pressure while there was a countdown.
Yes, it starts trembling. We're back in the hot seat. Thank you for coming back. There's quite a few of you coming back again for round number 2. So good to see. Good afternoon, everyone. Couple of quick pieces to run through. So chat box on the right, as you know. If you didn't come yesterday and you kind of watched the recording and you're catching up, fine, no problem. Chat box on the right hand side is for you to ask as many questions as you want. Generally tell us how great we look for a Thursday, and just generate any kind of comments and questions about anything that we dive into today. So we want as much feedback from you guys as possible to help kind of steer this. So do please use that chat box. I will try and answer any questions on the fly as we go, and a thing that we think is good for everyone else will obviously present to Hugh to answer. And if I do miss anything, please let me know, or I'll just try and look through the chat afterwards and come back to you guys offline.
Perfect.
Slightly different session, I think, today from yesterday, right? Much more of a kind of live run through of certain things, which again should generate some more questions. If you do have any connection issues with this, do log out and come back in again, please. It should help. Lucy, we can't put the volume up any more than this, unfortunately. It's just how it's set. So if you can't hear us, maybe best to just dip in and dip back out, or dip out and dip back in. Cool. So yeah, much more of a run through today. Please participate in the chat. And I guess we'll kind of get stuck in with session 2 of the 50 Site Challenge.
Yeah. Welcome back, everyone. Yesterday was more about foundation setting, laying some basics, filters, projects, and letters. What I really wanted this session to follow on very neatly from is the filters. It is probably the biggest bit of feedback that we get. Filters are, they can be a bit hidden. Sometimes it's not clear which are the right ones to use. And then where that sort of translates, if you don't think that's the issue, where that translates is when you're running searches in the sourcing tool, for instance, you might be finding that there's a lot of sites that you're sort of having to click through, discard, and it kind of slows you down. So what I wanted to use this session for, now we've done a lot of context setting, is slowing down a little bit, doing a little bit live filter building, really leaning on some examples so I can see some have come up, talking around the data that sits behind it, and kind of showing how I would approach it. Joel, I'm really hoping that you're going to jump in and chip in if things aren't clear, or if you've got an idea as well. And also, leaning on any ideas that we get from the chat. And also, if I run into any issues of my own, I think this is a really good opportunity to sort of say, okay, this feels like a sort of a limitation, or this feels like as far as we can go. How do we work around things? And so that's a big part of what we're trying to do. How do we work around problems, in effect? Creative solutions, that's what we want to do today. So what we're going to cover, building effective filters, that's pretty straightforward. What that means is having an arsenal of filters. So your 3, 4, 5, 10 that you use for a given area, that is what we see the best users do. They pick an area and then they know they've got their 5 filters that they can use reliably and apply those, and then do a whole no stone unturned approach. So that's something to bear in mind. Also, looking beyond the tool, I think when we do sessions like this, there's a tendency to be quite fixated. When we're working in land and planning, we have to be 3-dimensional. We have to look at planning. We have to look at constraints. We can look at other tools as well. So there's a Google Earth sort of thing I would like to show as well, where sometimes I'll take my workflow off of Searchland and sort of look at it from another lens, because we don't have a given bit of data. But yeah, raw and ready, I think, is the sort of theme. By the end of the session, what I would love to sort of be in a position to, because I want to keep this within the theme of the workshop. By the end of the session, I'd like to be in a position where if we don't already have our arsenal of searches, we know what we want to be beginning to find, or sorry, we know what we want to get to in order to get those searches in there. Ultimately, they will fuel your pipeline. You don't need the best ones to get 50 sites, but if you want to find 50 sites every week, which really is kind of the goal here, this is kind of how we do it.
Early question I You mentioned about building an arsenal of filters. So is the, and you might touch upon this a little bit later anyway. So if I've jumped the gun, but is the point of that you can create a bunch of filters and then never really have to do it again? Because once you've got an arsenal of filters that you know work and you like, you can just use those over and over again. Maybe tweak them occasionally, but once you've built out something, that's your library, and then really the rest of the kind of preset filters we have, you don't really need to use anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And there's lots of places and appreciate we sort of, we're in software day in, day out, and we're subscribed to software, but for people in the property industry, software is actually kind of a relatively new thing beyond accounting. But there's kind of two things that are really important when it comes to bringing software into your business. One is, what is the investment in time that you're going to put in early on? And then what is the sort of time that you need to sort of habitually use the software? So what I mean by that is creating your arsenal of filters goes into the box of, this is time that I will spend today and not really have to do again. Now, you will want to revisit them and improve them later, but this is an investment in later. An example of where you need to keep coming back every week, you've got to find the sites. The platform's not quite at the point where it'll find sites for you. Maybe it'll get there in the future. We'll see. But yeah, investing the time to build the searches and not feel like that's what you're paying for. You know, that's a one done job. So you might have seen, going to the sourcing tool, we've got preset filters. We're starting to bridge that gap, but those are really jumping off points. The important thing is to get your IP on the platform, make it yours. If you were to ever log into someone else's account for some unknown reason, you would find it a bit difficult to use because it hasn't got any of your IP in it. That's kind of where we want to get to. Right, not that we should be logging into other people's accounts. So the first one I actually wanted to go through is quite a lofty one. I'm only going to go through two that I want to go through. I'll just scroll down this. So one of them is going to be edge of settlement stuff. This is the stuff that I find really exciting. It's the stuff that I used to get stuck into when I was doing my planning. It was all strategic, so it was all local plan promotion. And when I was doing my land promoting, it was always edge of settlement strategic. And this is very three-dimensional. This is where the sourcing tool will get you probably 70% of the way there, 80% of the way there. But you're really going to want to be leaning on the other tools as well. Your planning, your allocations, your constraint layers. It's like you're going to need a three-dimensional view or a holistic view, because you're going to have to look quite far into the future. I'm just going to scroll on to another one that I want to show in a bit. Small sites. I think that's a really nice sort of way of looking at this. It's not quite immediate land. You know, it's not on the market and it's not being traded and it's not up for sale. But these are ones that you can be a bit more creative. They're usually easier to dislodge. You know, we're not talking about land assemblies, single owners, probably your sub 10 units is what we're getting away on these small sites. And generally they require more filters. So I'll go through what's in here, but they usually require you to be quite specific. And what we're trying to do is get to that sort of 1 in 5 save rate. Yes.
What do you mean easier to dislodge?
You're probably talking to a homeowner. You're probably talking to someone who owns the site. You're probably talking to, you're less likely to be talking to a farmer and having to change the use of the land. So there's usually a sort of a bit of an easier play there. They're also better, more strategically placed. They're almost always going to be in the settlement boundary. At least if you're doing small sites, you have the opportunity to do that. So you've also got policy on your side. That's kind of what I mean. They're a bit more, but where they're a bit more streamlined, and you would think that you don't have to promote them and go through the local plan process. You could just probably put in an ad hoc application. They're usually a little tricky. Where's my access? What's the neighbor? Have I got overlooking? What's the density like in the area? And we kind of have to take a step back. But again, a big part of building an off-market portfolio, we are not trying to do planning assessments on these sites. We are trying to get a gut feel. We're trying to get a gut feel of it. How good do we feel? And that is often enough to send a letter, because if we have to discard the site later on, I'd rather do that once I've had a call back from a landowner or a homeowner. It's not too hard to do. It's not too onerous. It also shows that my process is working. And you can say, look, you're on the phone, put a bit more time into it. Then you could think about an hour doing a planning sort of, top down, like high level finger in the air. If you decide that maybe it's not going to stack at that point, that for me is a really appropriate place to do that. So yes, small sites is where I want to go with this. And then I'll very quickly touch on, and this is, I will come back to these slides a little bit. I very quickly want to touch on this idea of super specific searches. So I've got 3 up here: garages and lockups. Love these. Most garages are used for storage. I think the stat is like one in 3 is used for a car. We're not talking about cars here. We're talking about, I put my winter clothes in there and my overspill. Anyone who has garages on this call can probably attest. So they're terrible use of land. They're a little bit tricky because you typically, if this was a garage, they might sit in various freeholds that could belong to this property. So you do have to deal with multiple owners. So again, it's a bit more complex in that matter. But the use of the land is pretty poor. Now, the reason it's on here, really easy to find. One filter, and it's a power filter. It's one that I really want to sort of spend some time on this. One filter will find every garage, basically. In there. Similar vein, petrol stations. Although yesterday's budget might have done something to this, but petrol stations for the longest time have sort of been looking at on the decline as we have been expecting to transition away from EV chargers, although they put an EV charge tax on. And so what a lot of people were doing is speculating that maybe petrol stations were going to go into disrepair or underutilized and actually seem to repurpose them. So it still happens. You do see some that are a bit knackered and tired, but again, really easy to find. And the third one I put on this one is agricultural buildings. Really easy to find, but also there's an example of where SearchLink can do more heavy lifting. The reason agricultural buildings are nice is there's a whole load of PD around it to sort of promote it through, so that's permitted development, to promote it through quicker planning. So in theory, they've already got permission. There's a few more boxes you have to tick in order for that to be true. So we've actually got a agricultural or Class Q tool that can find those sites. So that's probably an example of where we're probably not building it from the ground up. And you might want to use our tool because we've done a lot of processing behind the scenes with algorithms and looking at, how can we best tick a box with things that are quite searchable. Right, any questions on that, or can I pull up my screen?
No. Let's get stuck in there, mate. I think that makes sense to me. So if it makes sense to me, it should make sense to everyone else.
Cool, okay.
I'm
Year of little faith. Right, so the first one I want to talk about is edge of settlement. I think this is probably a really nice place to start. And this is my agricultural building we were looking at earlier. So I'm going to try not to move the map around too much, but I do want to go to an area that's going to be good for us. Now, why edge of settlement is probably a good starting point. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm in SearchSam now. If you want to follow along, this could be a good opportunity. I'm not going to go too fast, because I always say that. So I'm going to look for the settlements. So that's in the control center, and there's a settlements layer in there. I've actually gone and turned on a bunch of other stuff. So get rid of this, and sourcing we don't need for now. So edge of settlement stuff is really important if we're thinking about a sourcing strategy and building a development pipeline. This is probably where it's probably more of a medium-term strategy. Most of these sites will need to be promoted through the local plan. So we could try and just put a speculative application in. So say if we found the site, sent a letter, landowner's interested, you could try and just chuck an application in there, but you are probably better trying to engage the council, submit it via a call for sites, see if you can get the site allocated, and then put a planning application in. And you don't have to do all of those if we're thinking about promoting it or trying to get a promotion agreement in place. But that is probably the safest route for a lot of these sites. The reason being, yes.
Sorry, that's looking for within settlement boundaries or
outside of the settlement boundary. This is from outside of a settlement boundary. Yes. So the reason outside of a settlement boundary is key here is it's where most of the growth will come from. It's really hard to get it inside, especially if we can't increase the density of these buildings and so on. But all of the policy, national policy and local policy, is geared up to directing development within the settlement boundary. It is why we have settlement boundaries. Very similar to how the Greenbelt is supposed to operate. Settlement boundaries hold a similar role, keep development centralized, so we don't have sprawl. Is a big problem. This is like America to suffer from. So what the sort of lens that we look at these from, and this is, we don't need the sourcing tool for this in quite the same way, but there's a really good search that we can do, is what is the natural progression? And someone put it, it's Ben on our team, if anyone's interacted with Ben before, is what is the next piece of the jigsaw puzzle. And if we actually look at these, they do look a little bit like jigsaw puzzles, especially when we toggle on the ownership, and you can see how it all slots together. Now, just to break down what we're looking at here, the white line is the adopted settlement boundary, and the blue line is an emerging settlement boundary. So we've got one piece of policy, which is settlement boundary, but it's appearing in two places, what they've agreed to and what they're about to agree to, and that's kind of the direction. So here, where we have both, you don't always have both, sometimes it's just adopted. Here, where we have both, we can actually see the difference in how they're shaping these boundaries. And so we can see this whole bit up here has been included. And I would think it has something to do with this. These look like new developments. And so immediately I can see that it was here and now it's out here. And so we can see the direction of travel. So if we're looking at outside the settlement boundary, we are trying to look 5-10 years ahead, and we're trying to look at a piece of land and say, will there be homes on here in 10 years? If you think the answer is yes, you should try and make that your site. That's kind of the goal.
Question from Hannah, I think this is a good one. I actually can't answer it. So is it typical for a landowner to sell a site that has just been allocated for residential in the emerging local plan, and why would they sell and not take it to planning themselves?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we can actually answer that question with our land values tool. And it's really just a question of risk, cost, and time, like just how those things are all playing against each other. Now, we talk a lot about planning gain. Planning gain is where you make a lot of value. The reason you make, and that's so when a site that doesn't have planning gets planning, it can increase in value by about 10x, let's say. It can be more, can be a little bit less. And the only reason that exists is because the site has been de-risked. You can sell that to a builder or a developer, and they can go and build it out, and they can work out what new homes are selling for, and then they can work out their bottom line, but see if there's enough profit in there for them, and then build the site out. And it's the planning gain, the application, that's allowed it to do that. An allocation is very similar. If you get a site allocated, you have de-risked the site. The council will create a policy. Let's see if I can pull one up. If there's an allocation around here, you can literally, the council will literally create a policy for you. Signs for anything. Allocations. Here we go. So we've got this one here, and this site has been allocated. There will literally be a policy, which is this one here, policy ID ALBM1 for mixed use, part of the emerging plan. And I'm not going to find it in there, but this will show us. This site has been allocated for 45 homes. This has now been de-risked, and they probably haven't had to put a whole lofty planning application together. So why a landowner would do that, assuming it's the landowner or there's not like a promoter behind it, is it's probably the first point at which they could extract revenue from the site, and they can sell off. If you get an allocated site, you still have to get a planning application in. A planning application for an allocated site can still run for 45 units. This can still cost £200,000 and some. And it can still be refused, which is the funny thing. Even though it's allocated, there's quite a high refusal rate, usually because it's allocated for 40 and someone tries their luck for 50.
Right.
In a planning application. So those things are separate. So the answer is, why would they do it? It's de-risked, and it's really the first good opportunity they can try and sell the site. They could try and sell it with the SHLA, but a SHLA doesn't really have the same weighting as a policy ID. That's really the gold standard. So that would be my guess. Maybe they just needed some cash. So good question, kind of segued really nicely into this in terms of saying, what are the next pieces of the jigsaw puzzle? And I actually was jumping the gun earlier, and I was saving some sites. And when I had my search up, I actually had this whole area here highlighted, but I didn't have my allocations layer turned on. So all those sites that I was sort of thinking, oh, this is actually quite exciting. There's a bit of a land assembly opportunity. It's quite far down the line. It's already been allocated. How I could have solved that problem is I could have had this layer turned on whilst I was doing my searches, or I could have put a filter in to say, kick out allocations. I preferred to have the visual layer on. So before I actually start building a search, the thing I wanted to show, and I think this is relevant for almost any development, really. It doesn't have to be strategic. I'm in Google Earth Pro, completely free to use. It is like a supercharged Google Maps. I've taken a postcode from a site nearby, and I'm apologize, but they still have their stupid zooming in as if you're Superman graphic.
I quite like it.
You get bored of it.
I imagine it gets a bit tiresome, yeah. I quite enjoy that.
You get bored of it. So this is the area that we were looking at. And we can see here we've got this development. And the reason I've come here is because they have this feature here. And I always have to be careful not to go to Mars, Jupiter, Saturn is Prince. So I'm rambling on. This is the back in time feature. And we can just wind the clock back like this. So I'll do it a couple of times. I actually kind of want to find when that site was being launched. So I'll go to here. Now, this is the reason I like this so much is what we're trying to do today when we're looking at filters is we're trying to say what land will be developed in 5 years. Now, we've gone back to 2020, 5 years ago, as it happens. And we're looking at this plot. Now, if I was looking at this 5 years ago, I would have said this site is probably too big. And that was me being risk averse. I probably still would have sent them a letter, but I would say, given the size of the town, this is probably too big. Now, a giveaway that this site is already too far down the line. We see these little cricket pitches on there. Those aren't cricket pitches, they're trial trenches. It's an archaeology report where you dig about a foot down and you just sort of go very gently and see if there's any, Roman roads in there or clay pots and things, and are you gonna run into trouble? So wherever you see this, you see a lot of investment has already gone into the site. These are quite expensive to do, and they're often a requirement. So the reason going back in time is so important, if I was looking at this site, I probably would have saved this if it was a bit further back. So say something like that. But I would have been a little less hopeful, and it probably would have been I would have thought, 10, 15 year play. Now, interestingly, people might not have seen it. I'm now 8 years in the past. I think I was just graduating university then. And as a hopeful planner. And this site here is really interesting to me. We've got, and I don't really care about the second boundary at this point. We've got a string of homes here. We've got a sort of clump here, which is good. Clearly a main road, and then this little gap here. But this really is part of the same town. And actually, if I go back in time, it's been filled in with quite a nice looking sort of scheme. I can see that being built out. It happened very quickly, so built within a year. We're now in 2018. And so I like this because often people want to start building the searches and jump straight in, but it's actually like, well, let's take a step back. Let's see the direction of travel. Let's see how this site is building out and what's going on and which direction it's taking. And the center of mass is really appearing around here. And I'm not seeing a whole lot of activity down to the south, which is probably fair because the services are probably around here and they don't want to keep trips going back and forth. So I could be wrong on that. If I actually put forwards, not a whole lot, but we did see that this site here was allocated. I now feel like I have quite a good picture of the amount of development in this area and the direction of travel. And it's through looking at these schemes that have been built, going back 8 years, but also looking forward to allocations. So those two layers that are on. So I feel like I'm actually feeling pretty good about where we are. And also the other thing that I'm looking out for is that's a 45 unit scheme. This is 10 to 15 dwellings. So that's probably a bit more appropriate. But these, for a lot of people, these will be in the thresholds of what we're looking to unlock, that sort of 10 to 50. And there could be some, with a town like this, you could expect it to be as low as maximum 10, but obviously this is proving that it can support it. So that's enough of me rambling on. What I actually want to do now, I'm in the control center. I'm going to go to the sourcing tool. I now search for pretty much anything that I want to pull through. And we're going to start from scratch. So when you jump on here, this is where we get to. I will spend a little bit of time on all the searches that we've put together. These are, if you feel like you're a bit early on or you're in a sort of idea stage and you want to kind of think about what filters we have. By the way, we have about 300 classifications of filters. And then when each of those, we're probably in the tens of thousands, really, of combinations of stuff. So it's really hard to know everything. And so a lot of it is saying, okay, what can I do? So these are really good at sort of unlocking that. And this is, we've attached keywords to this. So if I search for land, it's really going to link up anything that's kind of land related. So this is class Q. but also it helps identify these. So that can be a way of narrowing it down. For this, I want to do a custom search. And I'm going to go through my sort of criteria of how I would build out a search. And Joel, feel free to challenge me or encourage the to sort of ask why I'm doing certain things. I'm just going to turn to this one here. This is kind of where I want to get it. And I'm looking at freeholds, so I'm speaking to. I'm using the developed area percentage. I'm using title area as an important one. I'm kicking out roads. I'll go into that. And also I've got this distance to adopted settlement, that and emerging. That's really crucial for this, and I'll spend a bit of time. Why? So I'm already looking at freeholds. The first one I like is almost always area. So title area is between. So a lot of people like to say it's bigger than half, bigger than a quarter of a hectare or acres if you work in metric or imperial. I like to do between because I really like the big stuff, just almost too difficult, and we can always circle back. So I'm going to start quite small, quarter of a hectare, and chuck it up to 1.
And you've got search sum with the map on at the moment. Is that because you want to specifically look in this area, or are you going to change that to a county or a council? And what's better out of searching within councils or counties?
Yes, that's a very good question. So right now, I'm in that investment stage where I'm trying to build something. And so I'm not focused on what my workflow is going to be. So I'm picking an area. I've got my blinders up. I'm not getting distracted. I'm going to try and build my search based on what I think this area is relevant to.
Okay.
When I actually want to start searching, I would select a council. The reason council is so important is I would actually spend a little bit of time looking at the policy and the stage that it's at. And if I can do that research on a council for 10, 15 minutes, I don't have to say, okay, I'm in Ashford here, then I'm in Tunbridge Wells here, and then I'm in somewhere in West Sussex. I can just say, these are all Tunbridge Wells. It's at this stage. They're also running a call for sites. So I'm excited by everything I see. So council is my preference. So right now we're sort of just building the search. So we've gone down to 56. I can't actually remember what the first number was. It's quite important to know that sort of distribution. The next one is going to be developed area. Developed area percentage. I'm going to start with 0 equals 0. Now this is Searchland speak for land. What that means is Searchland we get you as close to the data as possible. We try not to rename stuff. We try not to say this is what this is and we just go for something else. But what this is looking at how much developed area is on each site. And so if we say 0%, this is going to say nothing. We don't think there is any development of any sort in this. No sheds, no homes, no nothing. I actually think this is too strict. If you want to find a land search, 0% is perfect. Personally, I think anything under 5% is decent for a land search. That is equal to. This is also really important. We have a lot of selectors. We are searching a database after all, so it's less than 5%. I'm okay if there's a little bit of development on there. It could be a shed. It could be an old structure. I don't want that to exclude it. It can be useful. I'll actually zoom in a little bit too while we're at it. So it's looking pretty good. I'm happy with these sites that are popping up here. These are too remote, so I want to kick them out. Now, I'm going to go straight ahead and build the group for this. A group is how you can have more functionality in searches. I'll explain why it's important, but for now, I'm just going to do it. So I've got a completely separate filter group. I'm not adding into this one. And I'm going to search for settlement. And I'm going to say distance to nearest adopted settlement boundary is less than 100 meters. What I have just done is said, and right now that different group isn't doing anything. If I put this one in here, it'd be exactly the same. It's the next step that's important. I basically said, if a site is more than 100 meters from the boundary, I don't want to look at it. It's too far away. I'm looking at edge of settlement. So when we're doing edge of settlement stuff, it really is edge of settlement. We can sometimes make a bit of a jump like this, where there's homes. That's why 100 meters is, I think, is good, because we can look at it and kick it out if we want. But that's
and Hugh, when it says distance to nearest, is that distance from, is it only going to show us sites outside the settlement boundary? Or would you also find some that are 100 meters within the settlement boundary?
That's a good question. That should pull you up sites that are within the settlement boundary. Here we go.
So 100 meters either side of the actual boundary.
Yeah, so this is the question we get a lot, and you can always test it, and I'd rather not just give everyone a nonsense answer. This site here that's been identified is 1 kilometer away from the boundary. It's probably a bit closer, but it's still showing. So it's anything that is within the boundary, really.
Okay, so it's within and 100 meters outside.
Yeah, if we really just wanted to look at edge of settlement stuff, there is a way that we can say make sure it's also not in the settlement. I think it's overkill. These sites are quite big, and to be honest, if you find a big site that's in the settlement boundary, that's also a win. So yes, I did see a question: how do you get the settlement boundary highlighted? I've gone into the control center here, and I've just added that as a layer. So for me, settlement boundary, you do have to spell right. Settlements there. I did try and get the devs to work around my dyslexia. It did not work. It told me to go away. Right, so back into the sourcing tool. So I was in the process of building another search here where I say this. And what I wanted to do is search settlement again. And we have 2 bits of data that we're searching. It's adopted and emerging. In this case, I care about both. They're both important. So I'm going to do the exact same thing for the emerging, is less than 100 meters. That's probably not going to change anything on my map. But this is now incorrect, really. It's saying both of these need to be true. The reason I did it as a separate box is I want to set this to an OR. And this is why, if I have this turned off, so if I put both of these searches in here, it's really just going to show me things that are in the adopted settlement boundary. If I set to OR, it's now looking for either of these. So it can be within 100 meters of the blue one, or it can be within 100 meters of the white one. It's just a better search. So this is an example of why it's important to invest a little bit of time, get a really good search. I do not want to do this every single day. The way I get around that is when I'm happy, I will save this. And then you can just load that in. So we're now looking pretty good. And this is what I was talking about earlier. I actually spent a little bit of time and saved some of these sites. And I'll see if I can show that. Let's turn off that. I'm just hiding the layers. Keep the allocation on and turn on my project. Yeah, I had actually saved this site to the south because I was like, that's quite interesting. I like this. It's one plot. It's a little bit remote, but actually, if we look at the ownership, there's quite a few other titles here. And it's like, this is actually quite exciting. It's opposite homes, which is good. It's well screened. So I went onto the satellite as well. It was like, it's really well screened. So if you put a poke a hole in or get access from somewhere else, it's going to be a little bit discreet, which is good. So I saved that, but I didn't have my allocation layer turned on. So that was basically a wasted save in effect. So I'll explain how we can make sure we don't make the mistake that I just made. Let's turn the project off. So we're back to where we were. I'm actually going to do some reordering now. So I've got 3 layers turned on. I've got settlements, allocations, and sourcing. I like to keep something like sourcing at the bottom. I'll go for settlements at the top so it's nice and clear, so I can see that boundary, and then allocations there. And we're now looking pretty good. So I'm, for the most part, for a search that is trying to find edge of settlement sites, I'm pretty happy with this. And it's really just 4 things. It's a freehold, it's of a certain size, it's undeveloped, and it's within close to a settlement boundary. This is how it's done. So if I was to be done with this, I would click save and I'd be able to access it. I would actually go for and I'm not done yet. Yes.
I've just realized we've got save presets in there. Do I have that? And what is that? Is that a new thing we've just released?
Preset is a new thing, and it allows you to sort of have it as your, in those quick filters, it allows you to modify that. So we're increasingly trying to increase people's like IP in the platform. So saving.
Yeah, I see.
Yeah. Personally, I'm a fan of clicking save, and I'll show where this appears. It's just a bit cleaner, in my opinion. But for people who want to create a lot of presets, could be useful. People who really like the presets, could be useful. So I think it's a little bit overkill. Right. So I could save this and be done. But actually, I think the next step in terms of really zeroing in on a filter is this. So I'm now going to start to look at sites. And for this, I don't really need all of this stuff on. I can just trust that it's okay. I'm actually turning everything off. I'm not focused on saving sites just yet. That's not my priority, but I just want to check that there's no more filters that I need. So I'm looking at this one, I'm getting pretty excited. It looks like it's owned by a development company. On its own, that's not a problem, but there is some planning on there. So I have two choices. Let's actually look at the planning. Approved. It's going to be discharge conditions, direction of outbuilding. This looks like it's for, 1 and 3 parking. This looks like it's for a pretty decent sized development for the plot. So I have two choices I can make at this point. Personally, I like to see when sites are going for planning because, again, it just gives me more data, it gives me more information, more of a reason to get excited. They've done it, I want to be next. If I really wanted to, I'll go back into here. I'm not going to add any more filters to this. This is on its own. I'm going to go back to my original group, add filter. And the filter we want is max number of dwellings applied for. I cannot tell you how many conversations I've had around trying to rename this. It should be, but it's very literal. This is the number of dwellings that have been applied for in a planning application. And it looks across the whole title. So if it's had several, it's just going to find the biggest number in there. And I would just say I think doesn't exist is the one that we want. That's actually incorrect. So this is important. We are going to try and move away to a slightly simpler version of this. Is equal to 0. There we go. So I'm just going to turn that sourcing layer back on. So what that was doing is every single title, if you picture SearchLand as a database, every single title is like a big Excel sheet. And one of the columns on there, if you've got titles on the left, so your rows are your titles, you've got a column on there for how many homes have been applied for each title. And if we don't know, the answer is 0. So what we're saying, max number of dwellings in that column is 0. It's now finding all of those sites. If I put in a number here, it will find me sites that have permissions. So this is a really powerful one for kicking out planning applications. If I now browse these sites, kicked out that first site. My first site wasn't there. So go for that. Personally, I like to see them. I think it's good data, but there we go. Next site, this is an allotment. Allotments are really difficult. A couple of reasons why. They're usually owned by councils. Secondly, if you ever want a community group up your ass, this is the way to do it. This is a very organized group of people who are very precious about their land for all the right reasons. As suitable as a lot of these sites are, you're going to be up in arms against them. So, good luck. It can be done, but it's very difficult.
So in this example here, so let's say you come across that and you think, okay, that's obviously not going to be good for me, but there's nothing you can kick out that would... You don't want to kick out anything else. You don't want to go back to the filters and change it because you might kick out something that you are going to like. So
yeah, it's difficult.
We can't stop it coming up, can we? So what's the way of not wasting our time looking at it again if it comes up?
Yeah, it is difficult, but luckily I can put the thing together. So there is a filter. We have a filter for allotments. It exists and it's hidden, and I'll show everyone where it is. But there are a couple of ways that we could do this. One of them is we could kick out council-owned land. And actually, I have had success with council-owned land, but I think it belongs as its own strategy. So you should look for council sites. I don't think you should pepper council sites in there because if you find, say you find 5 sites that are owned by a council, the recipient address is all going to be the same. So you're going to end up sending them 5 letters to the council office. And I think a council strategy should be a standalone strategy. It is viable, and we've actually had very good conversations in the past. Again, pre-SearchLand, we're speaking with councils. So I could kick out that, which I would do anyway. The way that we do it, and this is an absolute powerhouse feature, filter, is I've gone into add filter. And what we want to search for is classification, property classification. And in this case, I'm going to click doesn't contain. In the presentation I showed you, there were some specific filters, specific searches. Yeah, super specific searches. Some alliteration there. These ones are where I'm saying, show me anything that has a garage, show me anything that is a petrol station, show me anything that's an agricultural building. What I would do here is say, doesn't contain allotment, and go. Now, SearchLand hasn't, and we see that this site has now been kicked out. SearchLand hasn't done any work to look at what all the allotments are. We're not doing any AI and satellite image processing. We're not doing any of that. What we do have is access to OS data, and a lot of people don't consider this to be data, but it's one of the best data sets that we have. And they have classified every piece of land and every use on that. So every one of these bits on the map, not the titles that are highlighting, but every one of the bits in the OS master map is about, I think it's about 400 classifications. So if you wanted to see fisheries, you could do that. If you want to see abattoirs, you can see every one of those. If you want to see a running track, a garage, a petrol station, all of it's in there. And I appreciate it's a little bit hidden, but it's an absolute powerhouse search. So I'm going to do a couple other things. I'm also going to get rid of my council-owned land. So ownership type is one of, and I will do company and private. A lot of people are concerned if the owner is a developer. I would say unless there's a planning application in, I would say that's still a really good person to send a letter to. You have no idea what their finances are. You have no idea if they're struggling or if they want to offload the site or if they've overreached. It's also a really good contact to have, and they can speak your language. So it's a good sort of communication point to have. If it's got a plan application in and their discharge conditions, it's probably too late.
On the ownership piece, what's the difference between a corporate and a company? I get this a lot.
Yeah, so a corporation is really anyone who has a board. It's defined by land registry on here. So if I just show these, any of these green ones are corporations. And if I just click on one, we should get a sense pretty quickly. Town and Country Housing Group. And then this one is probably also Town and Country. They usually tend to own similar plots.
So like your network rails and stuff like that.
Yes, basically they have good sites, and it's a shame, but they have good sites because they're so hard to communicate with. And these organizations don't know what they own, really. They're very old school. And so often we'll come across their plots, but it's really hard to communicate with anyone there. It's really hard to find a decision maker, someone who cares, knows what's going on, and it's just very difficult. So unfortunately, the ownership type I tend to find is a bit of a blocker. So company and private owner, I find are really good avenues. On that, council is good, but I think it deserves its own strategy. So what I might even do is I might save this search if I'm really happy with it, and then I might save another one with council and land and just keep them separate. So I'm still in creation mode here. And what I would encourage everyone to do is get really close with the filters. When we browse these sites, just see if we're still happy. Now I do need my layers on. So you can see that I'm not turning my layers off. I'm just hiding them in the view. That means that I can always come back to them. And I can go this way. Now this is an interesting one. There's nothing I can do to really discount it. It's within the distance. It's next to an allocation, which is great. But it's really, it's an island. It's on its own. This site would need to come forward with this. So on paper, it's good, but it's a bit too difficult. Maybe for a small site, but it's too far away from the settlement boundary. This site, and by the way, when you do enough of this, and I think a lot of people in the room feel this, you could probably get a good gut feel just from looking at the map alone. That's all your context. That's all your like subjective stuff. I'm looking at this. Long access, which means I need to measure the distance of the road. But if it's a good site like this, you do have an avenue of potentially acquiring one of these and just going through. Can be a bit difficult to get access at the end of the settlement like this, because it just creates this weird round trip, but this also looks possible. So that's your contextual information. A lot of what people don't do, but would make them quicker, is you can customize your view here. So if I click customize, I really care about planning, ownership, title metrics, constraints, use classes are big. Residential sales are also quite important. And I can just bump these things up. So I'm also going to chuck a local plan up above sales and allocations as an example. I'm just going to do allocations for now and put it there. That will reorder this view. So when I'm trying to decide on sites in less than a minute when I'm actually doing it, and knowing that I don't have to scroll all the way down and then all the way up will help with that. So we can see we've got an owner, don't really care what the owner is about for now. Planning constraints. And then this is where I would actually have some constraints on my map too. But ultimately I'd save this and move on, but I'm still trying to create my search. So we've got a nice little strip here at the back, which is interesting. Could work with some of these. But I'm trying to get excited by some of these sites. And right now I'm feeling like this is actually a pretty good search here. So what I would actually do before I do my final thing is I'm in the control center and I'm going to go into planning constraints. I want to have flood zones on. I want to have conservation areas, Article 4 don't care about. TPO, for sure you're going on. Public rights of way are going to be really interesting. Greenbelt in this area. Ancient woodland, a lot of that in Kent. Triple SIs. You don't have to do this, and I'm kind of going to stop there. There's probably a bit more you could do, such as listed buildings. And now, I'm going a little bit quickly, I apologize. But I just want to sort of reiterate what I've done here. So I'm now back in the sourcing tool. I'd actually do one more thing. I would turn on my ownership layer, but I'd have all of these turned off. This is quite a crowded view. I would say this is probably more of an advanced way of doing it. If you're figuring out search sound and you find it complicated at times, this might not be the best option for you. But because I kind of know that I'm looking at this title, because I know that it's highlighted and we're in the sourcing tool, this kind of helps. I'm now looking at every single plot from a policy lens. So I've got my national policies here. I can see conservation areas, listed building, flood zones. I can see that there's a public right of way. I can see the ownership here. So I can see that we've got two pieces there. And if I want to cut through that noise, I can turn it off and look at it this way. So I can sort of bounce between these. If I like a site, I would save it and put it in the project and then move on. And same thing, first I'll probably look at it like this, and I think this is quite interesting. It does come quite far south, but actually we've got this sort of development here, really well screened, at least to the south on this side. This is a good strategic site for sure. Turn on the layers. Looks like there's probably a stream running to the left, so that's good to know. And I feel good about it. With this sort of view, how I can go between the two, I can be saving sites every 10, 15 seconds. So I'm pretty happy with this. What I would do, I'd go back, I'd save this search. So this would be my strategic or edge of settlement. And there we go, we've done that. And save that filter. But if you really want to do the sort of more complicated stuff that I was showing, you have another option, which is to save a workspace. So I'll actually call this strategic site finding. Now, what happens when I do that? I get distracted, I'm talking to someone else. It's the next day, I've lost everything. And I'm like, oh, God, I've got to rebuild that. If I go into the control center, workspaces, I look at my workspaces and strategic.
Strategic site finding is on there. It's
Yeah.
fifth or sixth one down, but I think you put yeah, there you go, third one down.
We'll do this. I repeat myself a lot, so it gets distracting. It's basically going to say, hey, you have these layers all turned on in a particular order with presets. Do you want to go again? And I actually just turned the tool off by mistake. But that will basically take you back to your view and back to where you were. So if you're really happy with this, you can jump in and jump out and go from there. So that's a sort of suggestion on that front.
So then you built that search out that you really like, and that's based on that little tiny town. So then you could then go to more of a council kind of sized search, just apply that filter, and then you're going to get the same results, but in you get much more results, but to a council.
Let's get some bandwidth. Let's go back to the search. This is the search that I'm happy with. By the way, this is now like your search. This is mine. I feel like this is the quickest one. I feel like I could spend a morning on this or an hour and feel like I could pick up some good sites. If I was to turn this into an actual workflow and start, so I've done the investment, the council were in this as well as it happens. Now, say I'm saving 1 in 5 of these sites. Strategic land, it's actually quite difficult because you do want to apply a bit of policy and things like that, but say 1 in 5. I now know that I can stop and start this workflow whenever I want by selecting the area. So I went in here and said Tunbridge Wells, and I could always come back to where I was. And so if I browse these, I'm going to go from top to bottom in Tunbridge Wells at 303 and look at every single site that I think already matches the best criteria for a strategic site. The beauty of that, when you're really happy with your filters, to go back to this idea of an arsenal, when I finish that search in Tunbridge Wells, because maybe I know that they're in Reg 18 and I know they're doing a call for sites, so all the sites are ripe to be promoted. I'm then going to go in, I'm going to load another search, and small house. This is quite an old search that I did. I can go into more detail. So this is looking for, should be looking for those slightly smaller plots. I'm actually just going to go ahead and turn off some stuff. Don't care about that. Let's go turn off that for now, and so on. So say this is another search that we had sort of designed, the smaller sites one, and I can build that from scratch if we want, or share some content on the small sites one. I can now go back to this search. I've loaded in a completely new set of searches. They should be showing me more or less different sites, especially because my sizes are much lower on this, so I shouldn't have much overlap. And then I can do the same exercise and browse these. So now I'm at 600 sites really, and the first site that's come up here is completely different. It's got 1 property on it, because that's what I care about. It's in an urban area. This is a very exciting development. And I can see it has been acquired, probably what looks like by a developer in 24, so about a year ago. I would still send a letter to this. So the really important thing is if we want to build a pipeline of sites, it requires consistency. 50 sites, which is the theme of this workshop, is a good start. But the idea is, how do you find 50 sites a week? Now, just to reference my slides from a bit earlier, if I just try and go through this one here. If we are running through these searches, if it takes about a minute per site, which is quite long, maybe for a strategic land where I'm trying to look at the policy and sort of constantly slow down, a minute a site, and we're saving 20% of them. If we've got 250 sites in that opportunities pool, so here, 292, it will take me 4 hours to get through that. That is a morning's worth of work. And so if I'm trying to say I need to build a pipeline, my goal is to send 50 letters a week, which by the way is probably on the high end. 50 would get you a really good pipeline if you did it every week for a year. It's going to take me 4 hours. That 4 hours is probably best spent maybe breaking into chunks, 2 hours on Monday, 2 hours on Tuesday, or you could just crack on, block out your Tuesday, do 4 hours worth of work and get it in there. To be honest, 50 sites a week would be actually a lot of sites. That would be 200 letters you were getting out the door each month, which would put you into, you'd have a really big pipeline if you were consistent with that. So you could probably halve it as well and do 25, 2 hours worth of searching. So to just sort of circle back to the point Joel made earlier is, and that I was sort of reiterating, is it's really worth investing a bit of time in building these searches. When you have them, save them, and you just pull them off the shelf and apply them to a council. Again, is probably it's something I'd really recommend. If you're a bit more driven by price and other things, there's other things you could do to sort of price being like GDV, what homes are selling for. There's other things you can do. But that means that when you start to block out your calendar for site finding time, you are not messing around and faffing and putting searches together and doing other stuff. You might be improving your searches and just sort of making them a bit better each time, but you're really going for it. And that is really what separates the sort of good from the greats in there.
Show where that filter's saved now. So you've saved it, and where's your library of filters?
Yeah, so if I actually go back, this is when you open the tool, there's a lot coming at you. These presets, these are the ones that Searchland has created. We've gone in and sort of said, these are good searches based on our demos. Saved filters is where any user on your team is putting these on here. commercial refurb, solar rooftop. And actually, this is probably a really good way of showing you just how diverse some of these searches are. This search will be designed at finding probably, I would have thought, flat roofs where the use class is a hotel, so that they can go and put solar in there. This is the one I was looking at, the edge of settlement, that I created. This one will be about finding storage properties. So if I apply this, actually it looks like offices with expiring leases. So these save filters aren't the ones that SearchLine has created. It's the one that you and your team have created. And this is what I'm talking about, your arsenal of saved searches, and really making sure that these are good. Then from there, you pick an area. So this is the whole of the UK. That would be nice. But the way it works, we've got this sort of good search bar here, which will search across all of these, or you could just search for planning authorities and pick the ones that are relevant to you. It will take that exact search. So we'll do this, shops for tops, because that's quite a nice one. And someone mentioned about use classes. And we're now in Basildon. 5,000 opportunities. And this is looking at, the big one here is use class. So someone mentioned about use class. If you click add filter, a really easy thing to do is just to search, but I can also see it here. It's a really popular one. So use class contains probably any. Right. We're getting close to time. Just to sort of circle back, filtering is a really big, I think it's probably one of the biggest hurdles that customers face at SearchLine. And a lot of it is because we have so many, it's vast. So the presets are a really good starting point, but the best starting point, in my opinion, is to find a site that you want to recreate. Remember, we went back in time and we saw that big sort of field and we saw its edge of settlement, and say, what data does SearchLine have that get me to that site? And you can start applying filters, and if your site is still there, you know that you're zeroing in. The other thing we looked at is a project board. And so whilst people really struggle with filters, if you had, say we gave you like 10 of the highest converting filters and you're saving every single site for them, if you don't have a good project board, your pipeline is going to crumble within about 4 weeks, because you're just going to start losing sites. They're going to start falling at the bottom. They're going to start clumping. So my ask for everyone as part of this workshop is work on the filters, go through there. If you've got questions, hit us up, see if we can do that. There's a chat bot as well, and there should be a few sort of quick guides in there on how to zero in, but also look at the title. The title says use class. You can probably just search use class in the filter, but also make sure you have a project. If you don't have a nice clean project, we will face problems later. Now, the next thing to focus on is a letter. I'm a little less worried about that because unless you have 50 sites or a number of sites that you're ready to save, you're not going to be able to send the letters anyway. So we can cross that bridge a little later on. So on the letters, first tranche of credits have gone out from the last attendance. There'll be a few more credits on this one. So if anyone's attended both, you should be up to now 50 credits. So we're in good stead that come Tuesday next week, I will have 50 sites in my pipeline. So this is my pipeline. It's not very good. I've got 3 sites and one of them I need to kick out because of the allocation. But I will get to a point where I will send the rest of the letters, and then we will distribute the rest of the credits too. Right, we're just about at time. Is there anything else, Joel, that I haven't?
I guess homework ahead of Tuesday is to get your sites in.
Get your sites in, yeah, and let's not get too obsessive about trying to build every search that you want. You know, let's say if one of your searches is good and it's pulling up 300 opportunities, say for a council, you're in a good position. You've probably got more than enough sites in that one search. The other stuff can come later. So when it comes to the week after, when you're saying, how am I going to get my other 50 sites? Then we need to start thinking about more stuff in there. So let's not make perfect is not really the goal here. Good enough is the goal. So I think that's also a really common thing that I see where good users, people who have a lot of industry knowledge, are failing, is that they're trying to get to things to be perfect. It's like that is going to slow us down. We just need to get to a point where we're happy with something and we're sending letters out the door. All of the improvements come later. Right.
Lovely. Yes, good. Okay, cool. So yeah, get your sites saved ahead of Tuesday. We'll start sending out some letters on Tuesday. As you mentioned, credits will be in the bank already, so we're good to go then. If I've missed any questions, I've been trying to kind of frantically type away. If I've missed any questions, I'll go through all the chat and just come back to you offline. There's a couple I've mentioned I'll take away because I didn't have an answer. So we'll get back to you by the end of the week and see as many of you as possible on Tuesday for round 3.
Excellent. And on Tuesday for round 3, I am actually going to be I'm going to try and send letters from my letter template with my contact details and everything. I haven't done land sourcing in over 5 years. I think it's really valuable exercise to see it through to the end. So I will be clicking send. And hopefully, if I get some responses on the back of that, I will try and record and track. So maybe there can be some follow-up stuff that's showing how I handle responses. And then if anyone wants a piece of land, you know how to reach me.
Right. Cool. The recording of this will come to you in like 10 or 15 minutes. I'll also send over the slides. If there was there additional slides to you for this session? Or
I'm building them as we go. So visit the first presentation. You should find the next slides.
Same link as you've already got. And yeah, see you Tuesday. Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Thanks you. See you later.